Welcome everybody to Fellowship of Faith. If it's your first time here, we're glad that you have joined us this morning. Hopefully you have felt welcome. Hopefully you've felt God here, God's presence here already this morning. I'll be up here very briefly, and we've got a couple different folks coming up to speak this morning about different activities and things that they've done with as far as being foolish for the sake of the gospel. And as we've gone through this month, and we've talked about the idea of being a foolish leader, and we've talked about the idea of having foolish relationships, and we started with this idea of the foolish gospel of Jesus Christ. And we have talked a lot about a lot of different things, and sometimes when you start thinking along that line, we get the desire to start doing something, but we don't really know where to start. What's the first step through there? And one of the things I want to remind you guys of, as we have been going through this, is constantly two images have constantly come back into my head and have reminded me why we have them as part of our community of faith. And the first is the basic logo. If you drove up the driveway this morning, or if you've just driven by 35 before, or you've looked at the program, you should know what the Fellowship of Faith logo looks like. So, do you have a cop version of that up there, Brett? That's not it. That's the other one. Okay, there it is. Oh, that's my least favorite version of it, but there it is. So, I don't know. That just looks slightly painful to the guy getting out of the boat. See, now you guys will we have to change our logo now. But I've actually gotten out of boats and had, that similar experience. But here's the deal. With this idea of walking out of the boat, the whole premise of Fellowship of Faith, when you talk about the people, you talk to the people who were part of that first group, who really started feeling like God was moving them to start something new in Gallia County. They talk about a study that they did called "If You Want to Walk on Water, You Got to Step Out of the Boat" by John Ortberg. And part of the thing is this idea. And so one of the reasons the logo is this man stepping out of the boat is because it's the DNA, it's the ground, it's the foundation of what we do, why we do what we do. The story of Peter seeing Christ on the water and actually saying, if you're walking on the water, I want to walk with you, and getting out of the boat, taking that first step. Now, I'll tell you, there were 11 other guys at least on the boat. And that first step that Peter took, was one of the most foolish steps anybody could take. Until that point, they'd only seen one person walk on the water, and they knew he was the Messiah, and even that he was the Son of God. So they'd seen him heal people. They'd seen him do amazing things. So seeing Jesus walk on water is a pretty big deal, but it was Jesus. Jesus did amazing things. But for Peter to take that first step out of the boat was one of the most foolish steps any person could take. When we start talking about following God, where God leads, oftentimes that first step seems completely and totally foolish to everybody around us. We know from our own experiences that the first step is often the most difficult. Right? And we've had this conversation recently here, when we have times of response and times for people to be able to come up and pray or to go back and pray. I know from my own experience in the sitting in seats or pews growing up, that oftentimes there were times I felt like I needed to go forward, or I should go somewhere and talk to somebody, but it was that first step that seemed like was the most difficult. It felt like my feet were cemented to the floor. But after that, that first initial step, sometimes I felt like I was running to the front of the room. The first day of exercise is the most difficult. The first day of diet Actually taking that first day and starting it off, those are the most difficult steps. And even in our faith, if you think back to your walk with Christ, that day that making that decision to follow Christ, it wasn't necessarily the decision itself, it was that initial step of faith. So this morning, we're going to be focusing on foolish steps. The fools who take the steps that maybe other people don't take. If you want to look at the other logo, Brett, you can put that up there now because we use this one often too. When we made some changes last year, one of the things we discussed was the fact that you can only step out of the boat for so long. If you're posed like this, for 11 years, that is inconvenient and you get cramps. Eventually, you have to start the process of walking on the water. And so when we made the change to this, it wasn't because we didn't feel like we need to continue stepping out, but we also realized sometimes you got to start moving forward. You got to get out of the boat and keep moving toward Jesus. And so those are the two ideas that I want you to think about this morning. Now, the first person we have coming up this morning his name is Jim Blevins. Jim, you can come on up. He recently, and we talked about it a little bit before he left. He recently went to Africa. I'll let him tell you all about it. I don't normally, call my members fools, but I don't. But anyway, Jim. So many things go through my head. But Jim took his foolish step last year, or earlier this year, and basically, because his son invited him to go on this trip, he was able to go to Africa and see things. And I want to just let Jim talk a little bit about his foolish steps that he took, and then we're going to go some more. And we've got another one. We've got someone else we're going to talk about who's in the same family but better looking. So go ahead. Oh, Jim, I like that shirt.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is it on?
Hello, hello.
It's your grandson running the sound, so just if you get messed up, just yell at him.
Come on, Eric. Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, the shirt was a gift that we received as we departed from the school and the church people there that we visited. As Jamie said, I went on. Was invited by my son, who is a Methodist minister in New Washington, on a mission trip. He had been there a year ago with his family to the same site, and he was going back to lead a mission to accomplish a couple of things, and he invited me, which was great. We went to Bulawayo, Zimbabwe. The objective was to build an orchard and a water well. An orchard for a local school that's supported by the church there, and a water well by a church that's getting started and is partially has a structure on their site and needed water. This is the gang that went. Jack, who is actually an acknowledged 60s hippie, who was actually the technical expert on the trip for both of the projects. Scott in the front, me in the back, and Melissa is the wife of a Methodist minister also up in the Cleveland area. This is the plane we flew on from New York to Johannesburg. We left in snowy, cold weather and arrived in the middle of beautiful, warm, sunny, 80, 90-degree weather. This is a little map that's on a screen in the plane. I thought I'd give you an idea of where Zimbabwe is located. It's in central part of the southern tip of Africa, right above South Africa. You can see Zimbabwe there. The Emasini school was kind of the focus of our trip there. To get there, you had to go out in the country from the city, and those are typical of the country roads, mostly dirt. This was a plaque on the school. It's a secondary school, and it's been there for 5 years. Those are the two buildings. It has two school buildings with 4 large classrooms. As you can see, they use solar panels to get some electricity during the day. That's an inside shot of a classroom with us in there looking around. The well project. This is the church, and that's actually where they hold their services now, and that's the site needing water. That's the inside. You can see it's very modest. Poles holding up the roof, and the inside is basically empty. They have chairs they bring out during the worship service, and there was a small altar at one end. This is the drilling rig. What Jack did is he brought money to hire a drilling rig, which cost about $5,000 to drill the well, and that's the drilling rig, and that's the finished well. And the $5,000 was donated by the Rotary Club in Oberlin, Ohio, and that's what got their name on the concrete base. The Orchard Project, the other major project. We went shopping in an open market for axes, mattocks, shovels, and those sort of things to do the digging. Went to a nursery looking for trees to buy, to be planted. This is a walk out behind the school to the site of the orchard. Nice and grassy there. At the orchard site, the students and faculty had already pre-cleared. That brush in the background was all over that place before, and it was in piles. We moved it off, so it's been cut off, and that's the orchard site. That's what the brush looks like there. Evil thorns that go right through your feet, right through your shoe soles into your feet, and they had to be cleared. The students came to help. These are good working, hard-working, anxious to help students. This is Jack, our hippie, and he's our orchard and well drilling expert, digging a hole. We had to remove the stumps from the thorn trees, or they'd come back. Kids there know how to work, and they worked well. This was the holes you can sort of see that are being dug. This is my new friend Faith. She's a daughter of one of the staff there at the school, and we became buddies. This is Scott. This is after we had planted trees, and they're ready to grow. And this is a water line. We had originally had gone with the intent of putting a fence around it. We actually used that thorn brush as a temporary fence and left them money to build one, and we bought the line that it took to run a 600-foot water line from their water tower to the orchard so they could water the trees. A side project was pillowcase dresses. Some groups up in northern Ohio had made these dresses out of pillowcases. Had lots of them. We took them to kids at a church preschool in town. Those were the kids. That's a pillowcase dress, and they loved them. And then we left a lot to be distributed elsewhere. School activities. School kids love to clown around, and these guys are no different. You get your camera out, and they pose. And this was a field day they were having, and that was high jump, and they did racing and relay racing and so forth. This is me and a couple, or three guys clowning around. Again, they like getting their picture taken, and they like to see old men act silly. Scott had taken videos the year before of his trip and interviewing students, and he went to the classes and played them for them, and they got a big kick out of hearing their classmates talk what they said a year ago. The education is good there, excellent. I took a picture of the blackboard just to show you some of the topics they were talking about. Here they were talking about humidity, instruments for measuring humidity and those sort of things. Top-notch education. And again, clowning around the classroom. Church visits. Went to several churches. This is the main church, Bethel United Methodist Church. You can see it's a real nice structure. Notice the roof. All the roofs on virtually all the buildings are just joist with usually corrugated asbestos or metal roofs. No insulation. They don't need it. This is the choir, and you can see the kind of fixtures in their church as far as railing, altar rail and choir booth. This is another church. This is one that's hoping to build a nice new building, but in the meantime, this is what they're using. We were singing. That thing in my hand, a guy next to me loaned it to me. That's one of the two musical instruments they use. It's like a gourd with a rattle. And they do a lot of preaching, singing, and musical instruments. There's guys holding those on the left, you can see. And then there's a drummer. He was the other instrument. I'm not sure. I think his name was either Stevie or Josh. As far as housing, I tried to get some shots to show the different types of housing. It's really an interesting country in that there's some abject poverty, and it's kind of reflected in the homes. This is one of the modest homes that's right there at the school that one of the school staff lives in. You go out in the country, and you'll occasionally see people still living in grass huts. This was a brick building with a straw roof at an orphanage. This was the home of I stayed one night near Vic Falls, and home of a school teacher, and her husband works for an airline, and this is kind of a middle-class home. As you can see, all the homes have a 6-foot fence around them with a gate, a lot of barbed wire on top. They worry about security a lot. This is my host's home. They were interesting people. He is a retired railroad engineer, and she was a stay-at-home mom, and they have 4 kids. This is their house. They've lived in it since the 80s. They spend all their free time making it look pretty. It's got a wall around it and electric fence on the top of the wall for security. This is the room I stayed in, so I really had tough conditions, as you can see. This is my host, Eben and Kathleen Manitukutsi. They're great people, very wonderful people. They fed me for breakfast more than I usually eat all day. And when they found out I liked Pepsi, I was getting a Pepsi for breakfast and for supper. Incidentally, they have 4 kids, one son who became a surgeon, a doctor, who died young of an illness. They have 3 daughters, and it's interesting. They all have college degrees, even though Dad and Mom never went to college. They grew up in the small villages in the country, but education is such a premium that they made sure their kids got through college. Since there aren't very many jobs in Zimbabwe, one of their daughters lives in South Africa with her husband, where she works, one in Australia with her husband and family and works, and one in Amsterdam. So they go out of country to get good jobs if they've got a great education. This is an orphanage home. The lady on the right is a missionary who's been there for several months from northern Ohio, who knew these other 2 on our trip, who brought them gifts from her mother. We went on some side trips. Very interesting terrain. This is a rock mountain. The whole mountain was rock. We walked up the mountain, and on top are these big round boulders, and I could not imagine where they came from. I mean, how do you get boulders like that naturally up on top of a rock mountain? Eben was there. He couldn't move it. We went to a cave. Again, it was sort of like the cave up in Hocking Hills. Went to a crocodile farm. That's me fighting a crocodile. This is the ones I didn't fight. We were feeding them. A couple of lions. Some monkeys. Yes, there are people around in town that carry stuff on their head, just like you've seen in the pictures. Pepsi's everywhere. So's Mountain Dew. The interesting thing is, this is at a grocery store. We'd go get our lunch every day. Their money system is, they use American currency for their paper money. So everything's in American dollars. They do have their own change, Zims they call them, but they use American paper money because theirs got so inflated literally have some money they gave me that's no longer in use. One of the bills is a $50 billion bill. So if y'all need a loan, I got it. Victoria Falls was the big site. It's obviously one of the 7 wonders of the world. It's a huge ground fault creating 2 cliffs, so you can see the falls are coming on one side and there's a cliff on the other. You see it by walking along the cliff. And it's a great sight. And you ever see a rainbow from above? That's one. And this is a 200-foot straight down drop, and that's as close as I got, but they got closer. And on farewell day, this is a school. They did an assembly outside. Scott talked to them, and Scott led the project, did a very good job. We passed out field day ribbons, or Scott did, to the winners. They gave Scott gifts. The students had made bracelets, woven them out of yarn to bring back to kids here, so they're giving people. And they got together and sang a thank you and farewell song in Shona, which is their native language. And I think Jamie's going to play that sometime later today, and you'll get a chance to hear how enthusiastically and nicely they sing. I just made some overall impressions. Let me just run through them. People are very friendly. Their Shona language is their native language. English is extremely common. Virtually everybody speaks good English. Education system is good. They take a lot of pride in personal dress. They always wear their best. Kids walk to school, some to that Emmassini school as far as 6 miles one way every day. No school buses there. Their work ethic is excellent, as you could see by the students. About 90% of the population is Christian. Cell phones are very common. Dish antennas are on virtually every house. Internet services are heavily in use, not as much as here, but a lot of people do. Jobs are extremely scarce. The streets and the highways, the streets in the city and the highways are paved. They're like our 2-lane highways. You don't see any interstate kind of stuff. The roads elsewhere are heavily dirt roads. Automobiles are very common, but walking is much more common. Most people don't have automobiles. The climate is very nice, temperate, never freezes. Electricity, their national electricity system doesn't cover the whole country well, so they ration it and turn it off and on. People out in the country get it only a few hours a day, if at all. Economy's stagnant. They've got lots of resources, but they just don't grow. They've got little industry. Poverty is extensive. There is no welfare. It's basically work or starve, and people work. Even it's very, very menial jobs. They're selling fruit out by the highway. They make little carvings and sell them. But they work. Theft is a big problem, obviously, with the poverty. That's why all the security on all the homes with walls, gates, bars, and barbed wire. There's a heavy police presence. They're constantly stopping cars to check to see if they've got their registration. I don't think that's the real reason they're stopping them, because you can't drive 5 miles without getting checked. But I think it's more to exhibit a police presence. State-run TV news is interesting to watch. The news is always about, crimes of normal crimes, never political. They constantly praise their leader of what a wonderful person he is. The people are wonderful. They're just absolutely wonderful people.
If you go to Genesis 12, anytime I think about doing what God has called me out to do, anytime I think about what God has called people who call themselves Christians, anytime I think about that, I'm always drawn, as Paul was drawn, to the story of Abraham. And these are just a few verses from Genesis 12. The Lord told Abram, leave your country, your relatives, and your father's house, and go to the land that I will show you. I will cause you to become the father of a great nation. I will bless you and make you famous, and I will make you a blessing to others. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. All the families of the earth will be blessed through you. So Abraham departed as the Lord had instructed him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he left. So Abraham went. I can imagine when he started packing up all of the things that he took with him, that everybody in his hometown thought he had lost his mind. Particularly when they said, "So Abram, why are you leaving?" And he said, "God told me I'm supposed to go." But because of Abram's obedience, because of that first foolish step, the entire direction of the world changed. Because of that single step of obedience. The belief and the promise that God had made to him, that he had something bigger than all the things he knew. I get excited when I hear about people going to take those kinds of steps. Sometimes to go someplace, to a foreign soil. Sometimes because they feel like God's called them to do something crazy in the world in which we're living, in the community in which we're living. People who take those first steps often look like fools. But when people stand back and they look back at it years later, they say, that person had a vision no one else had. That, of everything that we've talked about this month, I want you to take that with you. God has called you to live a foolish life. He's called you to do things that don't make sense to a lot of other people. But when the time of your life is done, when you look back on your life, I promise you that one foolish step, the multiple foolish steps you've taken, when you look back, it will be worth every step you took. The message of the gospel is foolishness to those who don't believe. I call you because you are called to be fools. Take those first foolish steps. So this morning we are going to, we've heard from the old guy, which that's what he called himself, so I'm okay to do that. Now we're going to hear from someone else a little bit younger, quite a bit younger. Craig Sanders is going to come up. Do you have a microphone, Craig? There are no slides. You're just going to have to look at Craig and Jennifer. And after they're done, I'm going to come just kind of tie up all the things that we've talked about, talk about some other stuff, and then we're going to finish our worship. So, I think one of the things I want to commend Craig. He stepped up this month to do these the Skyping and all the interviews and things like that. I think he's done a great job. So, I would encourage you to you can clap for him. I hesitate because that kind of stuff goes to his head. So,
Thanks for that, Jamie. Thanks for that great introduction. I think it was very heartfelt, and I really, really appreciate that. Well, today is one of those moments as a youth pastor, a student ministries pastor, that I'm super excited about. To have Jennifer here beside of me. Immediately she said, "Oh my gosh, Pastor Craig is going to interview me. What is he going to say? How is he going to embarrass me?" And as a student ministries pastor, that's exactly what you do to kids. You try your very best to embarrass them and mostly encourage them to continually follow Christ in everything they do. And that's exactly what this young lady's done, and I'm super proud of her. One of the things I'll tell you guys, last week when we were Skyping the Myatts, and I was picking on the young teen who was trying to fix her hair and all of those things, and then immediately I asked her, what is God doing in your life? I told Jenny this week that it really started to make me, I kind of teared up, which is kind of the old Craig, I guess, because what I thought about was this young lady. I thought about when she was talking as a 16, 17-year-old young lady, talking about what God is doing for her in Guyana. What I thought about was, the Brooke Ryders, the Jennifer Blevins, the Erica Sperlins, like all of these young ladies who have said yes to Christ and continue to grow in Him. And I'm so proud of the decisions that she continually makes and the time that we get to spend together. She calls Jenny and I the cool parents, which I love. I don't know really what that makes David and Paula, but what it does make us is the cool parents to be able to take these guys out and have a little bit of fun. So Jennifer, why don't you just kind of tell us, first of all, where you're going to school at, because maybe some of these guys, they don't really know that, and then maybe some of the things that you've been involved in that are maybe Christ-centered, some of your groups and different things like that you've been a part of.
Well, I am a student at Otterbein University, which is in Westerville, near Columbus, and I'm a junior there. I'm an early childhood education major, so I'm going to be a teacher, starting student teaching next year. And at campus, I am involved in Otterbein Christian Fellowship, which is it's through Cru, Campus Crusade, and it's our large group on campus where we just go and worship Jesus, basically. So I've met a lot of people through that. My roommates all I met through my first Bible study at OCF, which is what we call it, freshman year. And then I'm involved in other things with like education and things like that around campus. So.
Excellent. How nervous are you right now? You're doing all right?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Well, good.
I'm more blinded by
do what? More
lights.
Blinded? Yeah, I just kind of like, I don't look at it, and then I feel like it's not there. So one of the things that we've talked about over the past couple of years is, as we were sitting here as a youth pastor kind of deal, is stepping out in our faith. And Jamie just kind of talked about the very first step and what that looks like. Why don't you tell us maybe why you wanted to be involved in this trip that you're getting ready to go on, and then where you're going?
So I'm going to Uganda for 4 weeks in May and June. But the reason, this trip is something that there are 2 education professors at Otterbein. They go every year and they take a group of students for 4 weeks to Uganda to work. And I've known about this since freshman year, and I've had friends who've gone on the trip before. And last summer I was just really feeling like I needed to go somewhere and do something, whether that was like out of the country all the way across the world, or whether that was just like go to a camp or something and work for a summer. I didn't know what it was supposed to be, but I wanted to go somewhere. And so we started hearing about this trip again in the fall, and I was like, maybe that's where I'm supposed to go this year. But I met with the professor that goes, and I was really excited about it. Then I started to realize how scary that kind of a trip is. And I'd never been like somewhere that far away for that long before, and it started to really scare me. So I started to be like, maybe I'm not supposed to do this. I don't really know. And then there was one day I was just sitting on my bed at school doing homework, and I was like, I hadn't even been thinking about the trip, but I was randomly like, God, will you, if I'm supposed to do this, just like make it clear to me? And then that was it. Like I just moved on, kept doing homework. And then like 20 minutes later, I don't even remember it. One of the things I was nervous about was money and how to get there. And I don't even remember what it was for, but Mom texted me and said she had deposited a check from something, I don't remember what it was, into my account. And it was almost exactly what I would have needed to go on the trip. And I was like, okay, God, I think that's probably my answer. 20 minutes after I asked you to go show me, you did. So that was my decision.
Excellent. Well, those are the stories that we love to hear for sure. I know that even in this series, in this Foolish series that Jamie's been talking about the last few weeks, we've heard from different missionaries, different things of that nature. But I know for myself, when I went on my first mission trip, Jamie just described it. He said, when you pack up your stuff and and even your family and your friends look at you like, what the heck are you doing? Like my mom is sitting over there, and I was kind of laughing as he was talking about it, because the first mission trip I went on, I went to Dominica and to St. Croix, which is beautiful, and if God wants to call me there, that'd be completely fine. But as I was doing that, my family, my mom and my dad both, they supported what I was doing, but they didn't really understand it. So how about you just kind of explain to us, like from a God perspective, that was excellent what you just said, but tell us what you're going to be doing there and why it was important for you to do that.
So this used to be a trip where they would take like all education majors, and they would work in schools and libraries and build literacy and stuff. And it is still that, but it's not all for education anymore. We have a wide variety of majors going on our trip this year. But for me personally, I'm going to be focusing on literacy because that's something that's important to me, and I love teaching kids to read and things like that. So while we're there, we're going to be working in a library that students who've gone on the trip in the past have built, like they built by hand themselves. So we're going to be bringing books over to stock the library and training librarians and training the kids how to find books that are on their level. I'm going to be doing some like reading assessments with the kids and making sure that they're finding books that they can read, and they like can find books that are actually appropriate for them to read and not be reading like huge chapter books if they're not ready for that yet, and then not be reading books that they're way past ready for. So I'm going to be trying to teach teachers and librarians and the kids how to find those books. And then we're going to be working in schools. There is a digital literacy project that we're bringing. That's the African Storybook Project. It was started by a woman named Bonnie Norton, who actually visited Otterbein this year, which was pretty cool. But basically, like, these kids can write stories on this website, and it can be posted online, and then they can have it translated. Either if they wrote it in English, they can translate it to their native language, or they can write it in their native language and have it translated into English. So then they have stories that they've written they can take ownership of, and they can put it in both of the languages that they speak. So that's something we're going to be working on, training them in there. And then just working with teachers and building up the schools further, helping with bringing first aid supplies and stuff and everything like that over, and working to make sure that they have a big problem with young women dropping out of school. So we're going to be like working out those problems with those women and finding out why they're dropping out and helping them, encourage them to stay in school so that they can, move on with that.
Awesome. One of the things that I love about who God is and how he continually changes our life, and the thing that I thought was really neat is some of the mission trips that I've been able to, just listening to you talk, the mission trips I've been able to be on are things that I am extremely passionate about, which, first of all is God. Since we're in church, we've got to say that, right? But then second of all is sports. And like just listening to you talk, that is exactly what you're doing. You're taking the two things that you love most and you're putting them together. And I think that really excites me. And I'm really, really proud of you for that. Last question. How can we help you? What can we do as a church family, whether it's maybe financial or books or different things? I've seen a couple of your posts on Facebook. How can we help you on this trip?
Well, obviously the most important church answer would be, I would love your prayers. It is a huge deal, it's a big thing for me to go on this, so prayers for me and for my team and for the people we meet there. But then also, we would appreciate any financial support you'd like to give. We work through a nonprofit called Foya Uganda that was actually started by the professor that goes every year, and it works to build literacy and to build health and all this kind of stuff in Uganda specifically. So any money that you were to give would go into this nonprofit and would go directly to the projects that we do while we're on the trip. If you guys have any old books, if you have any, especially children's books you'd like to go through and maybe spring clean and get rid of, I would love to take them. We'll take them over. We're taking a couple suitcases each full of books to help stock those libraries that we're working in. And then any basic first aid supplies or anything like that you might want to get rid of or to get for us, we could take that too.
Excellent. If you guys don't know Jennifer, what I'll have you do is maybe repost that GoFundMe page. She started a GoFundMe page, and I looked at it right before church, and it had $50 in it. So I'm pretty sure we can do a little bit better than that. So if you can repost that, it has a great description of what she's going to be doing there, and even has the, how did you say it, website? Or the
Foya Uganda.
Yeah.
Foya stands for something. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head.
I'd say if you click on the website, we'll be able to find out. But yeah, if you guys want to help out with that, that would be great. Thank you so much. Why don't you guys give Jennifer a hand?
All right, so my last question for today, and I've got actually, I'm going to highlight some other stuff too, but the last question for today is, what are the steps, the foolish steps God has for you? Is it something as extreme as going to another country to minister? We actually have another young lady who's here this morning, wasn't supposed to be, and she kind of surprised her whole family. to be here. Actually surprising me too. Katie Blodgett, you stand up, Katie. That's all you have to do. You don't have to talk. That's Katie. Who's also leaving in the next few weeks to go to Guatemala. She's going to be there for 6 weeks. 6 weeks. The difference that what she's doing, I think, is foolish. She probably thinks is awesome, is because they're actually backpacking through Guatemala. Like they're not staying in hotels and stuff, which is probably like real missions work. But she's going and they're immersing themselves into the cultures of Guatemala, doing a lot of different things as far as finding ways to serve those communities. But one of the great things about what she's doing, and one of the things I think is cool about what Jennifer's doing, is they are going in and finding out ways to help the people of the area help themselves. Kind of what Jim was talking about as far as an economy that's stagnant. We've heard a lot of people talk about going into African countries and South American countries, and how, and Craig and I have talked a lot about when a lot of times Americans' solution to a problem is to send money or to send food. And I've heard stories of food just sitting on docks rotting because it doesn't get to the people who need it. And so often the money goes, even if it goes into a good organization, it doesn't always necessarily, it maybe meets a need, but it's kind of like the old idea of, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. And so what Katie's going to be doing and what Jennifer is doing are ways that they're going and they're actually ministering to the needs of the folks who are there, but also helping them build a community around them. And so Katie's is going to be specifically, part of it is really focused on economic things and finding ways to encourage those people and help them the people of Guatemala to figure out how they can start businesses and do different things like that. She's not sure exactly what they're going to be doing because they will serve as the opportunity presents itself there. So it's a very interesting thing. She's got some different accounts and things. I've got a letter from her that has the information on it. She's also raising money, but she's not raising money for herself. That trip's paid for. There's I think it's crazy. It's like the goal is $750, which is really nothing when you think of mission stuff. All of that money goes to actually fund the projects they are doing. And so if you want to talk to Katie afterwards about that a little bit, I think it's wonderful. The great thing is, as people who follow Christ, we don't have to go on a mission trip to be missionaries for God. The trip that Katie's going on is through an organization that just cares about people and wants to make some change. And so often Christians, we feel like that to make the impact, we have to do something that has the label Christian on it. And what I think that we need to realize is as people who are foolish followers of the gospel, what we must realize is we can make the impact. We can be the message of the gospel, not just to the people we serve, but to the people with whom we serve. And so what Katie's doing is maybe not necessarily an official mission trip, but what she is doing is spreading the foolish message of the gospel to everybody with whom she comes into contact with, because she is a follower of Christ. She is someone who knows what she believes, and she is doing that in this process of working down there. I look forward when she comes back to hear the stories of what happened, all those of what that experience was like. So maybe that's your question. Maybe you feel that that's the kind of thing that God has called you to do. But maybe He's called you to just show up on the 4th week of May here at the Fellowship of Faith to go out and serve the Rio Grande community for a few hours. Maybe He's called you to be involved in other elements in our community around you and be the foolish representative in service organizations or school organizations or where in your job or in your family. Maybe you are the only fool in your family. We've been called to do that. What is the foolish step to which you're being called? I encourage you this morning, think about that. Allow God to speak to you. If you feel something, a tug on that, and you just don't know how to decide whether, figure out whether it's God or whether it's just a desire of your heart to do something, feel free to get in contact with me. Call me, talk to me. I will help. I've got other people. There are people here at this church who want to help you understand better the direction that God is calling you, the foolish steps that He's calling you to take this morning. The last thing I have to say before we finish with worship is this. Don't be afraid to take the step. It can be the beginning of a magnificent journey. Take the step and let God guide your path as you walk. Pray with me, and then we are going to finish.